Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Crisara, America's Service Sales Coach, and I'm here with one of my best friends, Nick Englehart, who is the lead trainer, the event trainer for Service MVP. Nick, welcome to the Service MVP podcast. It's long overdue to have you on here.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Well, Nick has a long and storied career. Most of the people who are doing the plumbing industry in Southern California and most of the Western United States know Nick. He's kind of low key, but he definitely he doesn't say a lot when he speaks, but he definitely is more powerful when he gets up there. Nick, tell us how you took the journey from where you were at to where you are now, working at Service MVP and doing our live events.
So, I started plumbing about 18 years ago. I was doing real estate at the time, and I was kind of struggling, and I had a friend that was doing plumbing, and I got to see like how successful he became at it really fast. So one day I stayed at his house, and he woke me up in the morning. We both made a decision for me to go apply for a job, and I got a job at a drain company at the time, and back then it was like, here's your truck, here's a machine, make $20,000 a month or don't come back next month. It was like,
Don't come back.
yeah, don't come back. They're like, if you hit the red 2 months in a row, you were done, and everyone knew that. So because of that, you can imagine how ethical things were. It was kind of like there was no training, no sales training. So we were just told to, sell liners and do what we could. So I kind of got frustrated with that. I still became a supervisor through that process. I was there for about 3 years. Had high sales with drains, didn't know anything about plumbing. I remember soldering 1-inch fittings into 1.25-inch fittings and getting callbacks and not even knowing what was going on. It was pretty rough. But so after that, I got a call and I went and worked at SpaceX at Vandenberg Air Force Base. I kind of lied on my resume and told them I was a master plumber, and I went up there and I got really fortunate because when I got there was master plumbers there that I worked on the oil rigs. So those guys really showed me how to plumb. They showed me how to plumb. My first day there, they asked me to put a service tee in, and I had it at like a 45-degree angle, and the foreman walked up and put a level on it, and he said, "Hey, do you know what plumb means?" I was like, so that's when everything started to take off. That's when I was shown how to actually plumb right. And
so let me just stop it there. So you worked at SpaceX, which is that the Elon Musk company? That SpaceX,
yeah.
that one?
So they were taking down the Titan towers that Lockheed Martin worked on when I first got there, and then they put in their launch and landing control, and we put in the hangar and the control center up there. That was a really, really good experience. I was there for a little over 2 years. We finished up that site, and they offered me a contract to continue and to go to Texas, and I didn't want to go to Texas because everyone I knew was in California. So I came back to Southern California at that time. Worked at a company called All Pro Plumbing. Had a manager there, Anthony, and one of his technicians, Anthony, that were super helpful at the time. I was riding with Anthony one day, and he threw me a book. It was like the Zig Ziglar book, and he said, "If you read that or not, that's going to be the difference between if you're good or not. Like if you're okay or you're great." So he just really pounded it in me and Anthony's heads that reading was the difference. That if we wanted to expand on our careers and become smarter, that was the way to do it. And unfortunately, back then there wasn't a lot of training, or training that at least we knew of. It was like all
Well,
self-taught.
it was like your boss Anthony said. He said, the training is you getting a book and teaching yourself. That's how I remember. It wasn't even that long ago. Probably about 10 years ago. It was like that. And then Anthony Pouliot, who owned that company, he passed away all way too soon. But he was one of my dear friends too. So we were kind of riding a parallel universe there, Nick. At the same time,
Sure.
I didn't realize that. And
Anthony,
then
I was already a hard worker, but I remember Anthony multiple times when I was on jobs with him. He would tell me he needs production to get out of his way, and he grabbed the shovel or the torch for me, and that's just the kind of guy Anthony was. He got stuff done.
Nice, nice. And then eventually you wound up at one of the biggest companies in Southern California working with one of your other
Yeah,
friends,
and then my other friend
named Anthony.
Anthony that worked there, he started All City Plumbing, and that's where it all really changed. We went there, and Anthony, to say he has high standards would be an understatement. If you make $1 million in a month, he's going to ask you how you can get to 1.2 million. That's just the way he operates. So the high standard really brought everyone's sales up and everything. And then, fortunately, Mike Munoz came to us and he brought us your training. Before that, we had tried Cardone University and a couple other things. And the attitude from the plumbers was really rough. They're like, this is for car salesmen. This isn't for plumbing. So, of course, when Service MVP came to All City, it was refreshing because we finally had benchmarks and stuff on what to do at the call. It wasn't like we were getting funny stuff before that. It's like, well, you need to change your tonality. You have to wait 3 seconds. And a plumber's just not capable of that. I don't know if anyone is, but a plumber definitely isn't. We
Yeah,
seen people getting more frustrated from that training than getting help.
Good, good. And then eventually you went on to even work at Absolute Airflow with Victor Rancour a little bit. You worked for him too as well?
Absolutely. I went worked for Victor, helped sell some plumbing stuff for him. Real quick, I don't want to backtrack too much, but when Anthony brought in Service MVP, the way I got to know the system so well was by training it in-house. We actually were able to take the system. Back then it was just self-guided. There wasn't, coaches. So I was able to train it within All City, and I got to see guys go from 30,000 a month to 60,000, and I got to see guys go from 60,000 to 100,000. So I just seen it change a lot of lives, and that's where I really became a believer in the program.
Well, good, Nick. Well, definitely you're welcome here. And you worked for many other. You worked for Victor for a while there, and then Victor sold the company, and
Came
he
over
got
to
he had so he and then he wound up working over here eventually. A guy made a. I saw he was out there kind of cut loose on his own, and I'm like, dude, you got to work over here. He knows Michael Munoz. Some of you people know that, and it's like a who's who. Anthony Cafagna. He's got Michael Munoz, Anthony Pouliot. Myself, he's worked. He's like Forrest Gump of plumbing. He's worked with a lot of great
everywhere.
people
Yeah.
that have helped you there. So, Nicola, today we're going to talk about the three sales tips you can give people in the course of your journey. Going from the normal plumbing company to SpaceX and going into other plumbing companies and eventually going through All City and then winding your way up here, and then even taking this training to learn how to teach it. Why don't you give us three? Could you be willing to give us three sales tips that you picked up that you think would be very instrumental for people to hear?
Absolutely. Like I said, when I worked at these other companies in the past, I was never bad, but my problem was I was never consistent. The reason why I wasn't consistent is because I didn't know what I was doing. Like maybe I did something and it worked right, but at the next call I would be doing something else. So I had no systematic approach to the calls. I was always doing something different, and God forbid me and the girlfriend got in a fight that day, or me and the manager got in an argument, because I would depend on myself and I would mess things up. So I'd have a month where I made $80,000, and the next month I would be at $20,000, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? My advice is with a
Well,
system.
so let's go. Step number one. What's the first tip here, Nick? If you don't mind, go ahead.
The first tip is to get structured, to get training would be my first tip, because that was my number one problem, is I didn't have any training, so I couldn't be
When
consistent.
you say structured, can you expand on that a little more? What do you mean by that exactly?
A structure, so like when we have our classes, we're teaching people what to do from the time they get to the call, throughout the call, and then as they leave the call, to maximize the customer's experience, so they get the best level of service through creating options and connecting with the client and
So
stuff like
kind of
that.
kind of passing them through this sequence that there's certain sequence or different rooms that are in a different call, right? Is that fair enough way to say it? Like when you first get there, there's kind of like, let's just get to know people, and then we get to know the plumbing problem, and then we start to get the prices and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, how important is that we compartmentalize those things so we can do each one of those with excellence? Tell me about that.
I think it's the most important thing. It's the most important thing to know what you're doing. Like I said, like the education part of it and knowing what I'm doing at a call has so much value. After I learned the system, I could be having the worst day ever, where I just wasn't there, but I could pull over, focus on what I was supposed to do throughout the call, what I had been trained on, and produce high results still. And before, I could never do that.
Wow, that's really good. So getting a system and sticking with the system and following the process sequentially, making sure you're operating with excellence, one bit at a time. Because excellence isn't really at the end of the call, is it, Nick? It's really
No,
what would you say
it
is
starts before you get there.
really?
I
So
think so.
so what are some tips before you get there? If you can just expand on that process, like what's the
Well,
pre-call type of
so
thing you can say?
Well, even then, like my pure motives, it's quality, reliability, health, safety, and service. And that blows by a lot of people when they hear it. But when I ingrain those things and make it my purpose and why I'm doing the call, I can be on the way to a call and I can get upset, and I can pull myself, pull over in my van and remind myself of why I'm doing the call, and just know that as long as I do what I'm supposed to do and provide the good service through the system, I'm going to produce results.
That's really good, Nick. Well, let's go on to tip number two. What would that be, Nick? What's tip number two you can give the service and sales professionals out there in this country?
I think the number one, well, I think you would agree, the number one mistake is people focus on the problem over the client. I became so good at plumbing, or at least I thought I was so good, that I would run into a call, find the problem, talk to the customer for 2 minutes, run out to my truck, come in with a $30,000 option that definitely they needed, and they'd kick me out of the house. And the best thing I could come up with was they were broke, or any reason but me is what I would come up with. So once I seen, by going through total immersion and taking this course, the importance of connecting with people and the value it has, I know definitely there's jobs that I feel like because I was able to connect with a client, I got that maybe 10 other people couldn't, just because I was focused on the client instead of the problem. You know,
So focusing on the client as opposed to focusing on the plumbing or HVAC or electrical, whatever it is that your trade is, putting the primary focus on the people over the things. Would that be a fair way of saying it, Nick?
yeah, that's a great way of saying it. And it was so bad at one point for me before I realized it, that I would almost get irritated at the client for getting in the way of the problem, you know, and like looking back at
I
that
hear
moment.
I hear that all the time. I hear technicians like, I can't get this guy to get off my back. He's following me around the entire call. Nick, is that a sign of trouble when
No,
somebody's
that's
following you around the entire
amazing.
call?
I have people ask me all the time, what do I do when the client won't leave me alone? I say, you're happy because you're at a great call. Like, you know,
Mhm.
so go ahead.
Because what would you say the because I think one of the ways you could kind of rate a call is how interested is the client in the solution or the problem, right? If they have no interest in the problem or getting it solved, or no interest in a solution, that call is going to kind of suck, right? However, when people are hyper focused on the problem, although it can look like a little invasive for most people because they don't know how to respond, right? They're lack the ability to respond. They wind up then going through this whole thing and not even knowing what to say, and so they get frustrated with the whole thing when people clients get too close to them in a way. Does that make sense, there, Nick?
Yeah, when the reaction should be the exact opposite, you know. Like if I have a client following me around the house, asking me questions, telling me about their son's baseball team, where they went for vacation, I know I'm doing my job.
I mean, instead of just answering the question with one word answers, what about what's a good route to do if somebody starts asking you questions? What's the best tactic or technique kind of turn that around where you're kind of learning now? What's the best way to do that?
Well, one problem I had before, we go over this in the training too. I know exactly what you're asking, but I was a know-it-all and I was a one-upper. Like somebody would tell me something they did awesome. I remember this poor lady's telling me about her poodle and how her poodle can sit and lay down. And I go on for 20 minutes to tell her about how my dog can go grab my keys and he'll play dead and all this stuff. And then we're sitting in total immersion and I see it pop up on the board and I'm like, oh shit, you know, like I've done that
Uh,
like a lot of times.
you became a one-upper. You get somebody who thought you were connecting by saying how much grandiosity you had with your dog, as opposed to her dog is going to be being
Instead of
put
telling her
down.
how awesome her dog was and how lucky the dog was to have her, you know, to really connect with her and make her feel better about herself. Like I took it as an opportunity to feel good about myself. So to answer your question though, just the magic moment part, like asking the client questions, getting them to engage, tell them about themselves. And then we go through our whole day and not too many people like will praise us or tell us anything good about ourselves. So when you can do that to your client, my opinion is if you go to the job and you don't even get the job, but you can do that for your client, you still had a win, you know, if you can make your client feel good about themselves.
I think one of the hardest things we teach here at the Service MVP, as you can probably see, is that to get people to be willing to connect and invest the time in the client, right? And you mentioned magic moments, right? Could you just give us a little bit of a tip about just if you had to pick something about a magic moment that everybody could kind of get, what is something that you think everybody could get from a magic moment that even somebody just starting out could at least
Even
do
somebody
this
just starting
certain
out, to
part of
make
it?
it really simple, when someone's telling you about a challenge they have or anything they're doing, or if they're making an effort to fix something, praise them for that, you know, because they're not everybody does that. Like imagine if you're walking through the office and I said, hey Joe, I just wanted to thank you for taking time to get us this training today. We appreciate you making the effort and it makes us all feel good to be part of such a good team. So thanks, we really appreciate it. Like people are not used to that because everybody's walking around so worried about themselves that when you could take a step back and notice what's going on around you, even for me, like the magic moment, it brings gratitude to me. Like I become more grateful for what I have and for the clients I have. But essentially, a magic moment's just praising somebody for their effort and making them feel good about themselves for what they do. So they'll quit focusing on the negative and focus on the positive.
You said praising people for the effort. What is that better than praising people for like their material possessions or their car or their driveway
I
or
got
something like that?
I
Tell
got
me
a
about
good
that.
story about that. I was with one of my apprentices. I've had two instances. I was one of my apprentices, and we walked up to this guy's yard, and we just done another big training platform that teaches you, to praise people or find something in common. And he says, "Sir, your grass is so nice." And he says, "I hope so. I pay $400 a month to have the thing mowed." And it just ended. He like fell flat on his face.
Kind of took the air out of the balloon by
And
praising
then
the
the other
grass,
good
huh?
one I had was we went in a garage and there was an old Corvette and this guy standing there and my helper says, "Oh my God, sir, I love that Corvette. It's my favorite car. Oh, it's so badass. And he said, "Hey, that's my ex-wife, so I don't even want to look at the thing. I just need her to get it out
Oh
there."
boy. So you kind of
Yeah.
put the, because it's like funny, it's like goes over like a lead balloon when you do the material possessions. It's risky to do material
I think it's
possessions,
I
right?
think
So
people know it because people feel it, see it so much that it's kind of a red flag for them that when you start doing it, they kind of see the the emptiness of it.
you kind of see that you're just trying to butter them up in that way. But praising the effort is something that's always authentic, because people are, when they're making an effort, they just showed you. They stayed home. They even just said, I took off work and stayed home to make sure I could get this job done right. Then that's something you could praise people over. Hey, let me just say thank you for staying home. It's so nice that you would make the effort to stay here and block out your time. I know you probably have a lot of things to do, and I really appreciate that. You see, some of the airlines have taken on the magic moments. Like, hey, we know you had a lot of choices, and we appreciate you flying United Airlines or whatever. They give you a little bit of a, little bit of a praise for making the effort to use that airline or whatnot. So that's kind of what it sounds like. And I think a lot of us, like, we just say that's nice that they would say that. We don't think it's phony or anything like that. We're like, you know what, they're right. I did have a lot of choices, because it's authentic in that way. Does that make sense, sir? And I think those magic moments. I think the one magic moment is always here. There's people who are blocking out their time and inviting you to the home. Nick, would you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%. People are making the effort to get it fixed, and a lot of times that experience has been stressful for them. They have a spouse that's mad at them. They had to miss work, so it's just been all negative up until when we get there at that point, and that's our chance to turn it around.
I can't believe a spouse would be mad at the other spouse because the plumbing isn't working.
I've seen it. I've seen it really
It's just
bad.
like, it could be like the tip of the iceberg. Probably not the plumbing, but it's probably like, and now and now you didn't take care of the plumbing on top of everything else you did wrong.
I told you last
It's
year to get this done when the guy was here.
Yeah. You never do anything about this house. And this is a typical of that situation, right? So, and of course, people going through that negativity, definitely it's praiseworthy. Joe, it sounds like your wife is lucky, even though she's not feeling that great about this, that she's lucky to have a guy like you who's going to stay home and try to get this problem fixed. It makes me feel good to be here. So thank you so much for taking that time and sharing it with me, right? So, Nick, let's go into the third tip. We have the first, so far, let's get a system and follow the process. Number two, probably, and I think people have heard that, follow the system and follow the
Oh man,
process. I think a lot of people say that.
we might have to do four, Joe, because I have two
But
really
yeah, because
important ones.
that's kind of a throwaway to that first one, because everybody, I mean, even Jason Walker does that one. So it's everybody's doing it.
So
Well
the next
along
one
everybody.
is
What's
making the options and customizing them and personalizing them for the customer.
mm,
Whenever I've gone into any shops or any of my coaching clients now and they're having issues and their average ticket's like 300 or 400 bucks, the first thing I ask the employees, anybody here that leaves options, please raise your hand. And I would say 80 to 90% of the hands stay down. So it's just the most
mm.
common issue I see with clients and their average ticket and not producing numbers.
Now, when you say personalized, customized options, there's also got to be personalized, customized observations. How important is displaying the problem? When you're saying make that presentation customized and relevant, it's not the presentation of only the solutions, but how important is the presentation of the problems, Nick?
So that's the most important thing too, because that's the bridge. The bridge between the solution is the problem. Explaining it right is the bridge to the solution. It's one of the most important things we teach as well. You know how
I
many guys
just
I always look on I'm on plumbing forums and stuff, and I always try and pay attention so I know what's going on. And there's this common poison going around where people are like, yeah, this company tried to rip this guy off because he had a leaking angle stop and he offered him a faucet, and I can't believe these companies are doing this. But really, once you understand your job as a service person, there's no way you could go replace an angle stop and have the faucet leak a month later and flood out the house and consider yourself a good plumber, or anything, any trade.
It's funny because I just talking to one of our common friends who works over at All City still, Mr. Donald Austin, who used to work at Gettle, and he worked over there at All City. And
Mhm.
I just talked to him over the weekend. You probably don't even realize that, do you? And he said to me, Joe, what you're teaching is what's called sick. He calls sick. Do you know what that means, Nick? Should I go ahead and tell
No,
you?
school
Can you
me right
tell me?
now.
He said sick is S, which means symptoms, like that's the faucet not working or the drain's clogged or the hot water's not working. Symptoms, issues, like what's the issue? Like what's causing that symptom to occur, right? The issue, the pipes are fractured or the
Water
pressure's too
quality.
high or whatever, the water quality sucks. And then the consequence, C, so symptom is S, issue is I, and consequence is C. So sick. He goes, that's just sick. Right now, what's going on is sick in this house. You got a sick house. It's got symptoms, issues, and consequences. And I like that. I like that. I think it was a good thing. I think when you explain the problem, I think you have to explain the symptoms, issues, or what's causing it, and then the consequences. The symptoms is just the tip of the iceberg. Nick, would you agree that every time you've done a drain call or some kind of plumbing call, that you can't just fix the problem? It's going to be like the infrastructure or the control system or the
Yeah,
other parts that are causing it. Tell me about
not
that.
unless you want to be an amateur and suck at your job. You know,
Yeah, well, you could. Some people do it.
some people
Some
do.
people just want to go home at 4:30. They don't care if they're really good or not. You know what I'm saying? Or like today's worker, I think, has a high value on getting home. I mean, truthfully, I don't think. I mean, we could all put out there that you can make more money doing this, but I think a lot of people just want to be home and do their thing. Does that make sense, Nick? Have you met
Yeah,
the younger
I see
generation
that a
yet,
lot.
or no?
Like there's people that you couldn't pay, triple time to come in on a Saturday, but I think that I think that's 100% truth. And I think that one thing that really brings to light is the importance of training and capitalizing on the call that your technicians are at and maximizing them. If you have techs that don't want to work past 4:30, they better produce on their first two calls.
Yeah, I think, and you know what? The funny thing is, when you're effective in your process, you won't work a lot of hours. You're going to work. You're going to make more money and work less time.
I went
So
from
that's
working 6 days a week, 60 hours a week to working 5 days a week, 45 hours a week and producing 30 to 40% more once I was
that's
trained.
crazy, crazy. Now, is there a final tip you want to give us, there, Nick? Beside the ones you've already given us, some golden nuggets you've already given us. Any final tips you can give us there?
So when I do on-site, this is the other most important thing, and I know you'll touch on it too. Um, Throughout my plumbing career, I was one of those guys that left the call, and I always say that was a really good call. And then I would call my boss and say, yeah, the client's going to call us back next week or a week later, and maybe that would happen 2 out of 10 times. So it like added a little fuel to that lie. But one of the most powerful things you can do in the service industry is to get a yes or a no, or
Mm,
schedule another appointment. That's like one of the most important. If we can teach somebody to do that, it changes their life. For
I
so
get it.
long, Joe calls it a happy loser. I was a happy loser. I would leave the call, think the client loved me. They would tell me how awesome I was, and I wouldn't hear from them. And then, a year later, they would either call back and still have the same problem, or I would just never hear from them again.
Yeah, yeah. So you had the illusion that they're going to call back, but then and so how did you fix that? What's the thing that you learned that fixes that thing where you're always waiting for people to call you back?
I learned to get a commitment, get a yes, a no, or a return appointment. The way I learned that is through our process. We have the clear future. Are you interested? Or are you not interested? And let them tell you. And I think it's really important that you let your client know that a no is okay.
Hmm.
Obviously that's not what we're shooting for, but I'd rather leave with a no than a maybe any day. And so many people are afraid of losing something they don't have. That no is really scary to them. But what they don't understand is if they can just push up to that no, there's a yes 9 out of 10 times.
Well, Nick, Service MVP is probably one of the most unique companies because every single month we do a live training with real people in a classroom that's right behind me there. This is a real, that's not a fake background. This is a real background there in our Culver City Training Center here. And we do a lot of in-house training for people too. But Nick, let's just do a little overview of some of the training. Give me like a couple paragraphs to describe each one. So number one, the heart of our program is called the Total Immersion Service Sales System, that was meant for service people and salespeople to be able to create high value in an ethical and moral way that allows people to increase the quality of the work through premium mid-range economy choices, and then getting the job done. So Nick, how do you describe that experience after teaching it? It's a 5-day training that we have, and tell me a little bit about what you've learned in the process about what goes into all that kind of stuff, and what are the how would you describe that to somebody as to what they're going to get with that 5-day training?
Well, I can tell you what I got out of it. All the stuff I told you throughout this whole interview so far that I did wrong, I learned I did wrong from this course. Like I would have
Hmm.
had no idea. So being able to come in not knowing anything about sales, or maybe thinking I did, and actually getting a real process under my belt that I could replicate over and over and over again to produce high results. That's what it's all about. And then coming in the class, you have other people with the same common goal that want to get better. You get to make friends that way and learn stuff from them. And then as we're teaching the class, essentially we're teaching you that everything you've probably been doing is wrong, and we're showing you how to do it the right way. But it's all in writing. It's so that's what I love about us so much. Like when we're teaching this class and we're showing you stuff, you're able to role play it with your partner. We're there to ask questions. And I know Joe does, and I do too. We welcome any challenges. If someone's hearing something they don't think is right, we'll walk them through it. So that experience alone, I think, is worth more than videos or anything. Just having a coach there like me or Joe that's done it in the field, to have the experience we have, to be able to hold accountable. We want you to hold us accountable, and at that course, you get to do that, and we get to help walk you through all this.
How about the CSR dispatch boot camp? What do you think the importance of that is for the average contractor to make sure that the office staff is trained too? What do you think of that?
Well, it's so important that everyone's working together. Like, my office staff can keep me accountable if I'm a technician, and then I can keep my office staff accountable as well. And we both know what to expect out of each other. I think that dispatch, from what I've seen in CSR, is one of the most frustrating jobs in the company. And I think the reason why is because they don't know what anybody's supposed to be doing. They've never been in the field. They've never been in a truck. They don't know the expectations. A lot of the times, those techs that want to get home at 4:30 are misleading them or not telling them exactly the way the job should be done. So once we train the CSR dispatcher, those expectations are put in stone, and now everybody knows what everybody's doing. So everyone's accountable, and now we have a machine that's actually running, good.
So now, and the final thing I wanted to say, one of the hottest classes we have right now is the call by call management. Nick, what have you learned about call by call management in that class?
Call by call management is management. It's the way things should have been done the whole time. I was talking to a client earlier, and he was like, "Hey, what is my manager supposed to do?" And I was explaining call by call to him, and I was explaining, gaps and finding problems in the company and fixing them. And he's like, "Oh, so he doesn't help wash the trucks, and he doesn't need to watch over my dispatcher and look at the calls and not let her dispatch." And I'm like, absolutely not. So call by call just gets you somebody, and for your technicians, to make sure things aren't done wrong. Call by call management eliminates the possibility of doing things wrong, and I don't know if there's a better business plan than that.
Nick, it's funny because a lot of times the management in the contracting trades turns into an executive parts runner, an executive truck washer, or an executive parts orderer, or an executive technical desk, or whatever type of thing. Anything but getting a new result, right? They're all they're focused on is things that are not getting a result, things that are just taking up time. That's one of the things I think that here at Service MEP we do better, which is the accountability. What do you think of that, Nick? Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely fair to say. The accountability is huge. Accountability is like what our whole process is structured by, from us to the coaches to the techs to the owners. Making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like I said, I don't think there's a better business plan than that. If not, people are consistently creating problems and then half-ass fixing those problems and then taking credit for fixing them.
So anybody who wants to get one of the live training classes with you, Nick, and I also show up from time to do some cameo appearances as well. Nick, what's the best way somebody can get to some of these live events and get some information on it?
There's multiple ways. You can reach out to me or Mike Busher or Shreya or Joe, or you can go online to servicemvp.com, and online you can find the dates of the available meetings. But anybody here is always welcome to reach out to us personally, and we can walk them through it and show them pricings and available dates, and we'd love to have you.
Nick, thanks a lot. Any final words you have for contractors out there before we end it?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be hard. I know it seems like it, but it doesn't have to be. I see so many, even people that have worked in the industry with me for 10 or 15 years, they have these businesses still, and they're still bumping their head. And if they would just commit to the process and allow themselves to grow, everything would be 100 times easier. So that's the number one thing I have to say is it doesn't have to be hard.
Nick, thank you so much. Everybody, we'll see you on the next podcast episode right here. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Joe.